Good morning, my brothers. We are here for another Fight Morning Quick Card Breakdown show where we look forward to UFC 299, but we do have a card tonight where we've got heavyweights banging it out. We also have 11 fights on the card, and 8 out of these 11 matchups are favored to end inside the distance. We're headed back to the UFC Apex, which means a smaller octagon. And we'll likely see a pace pushed in a number of these bouts. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in today. Let's get cracking this morning with a matchup in the lightweight division where we have Leroy-Duncan-Ribeiro taking on Abdul Karim Al-Selwady. And Al-Selwady, you'll notice, a Team Fortis MMA fighter. I've earlier in the week mentioned Saif Saud and Team Fortis. When are they going to get back on track? Is Matt Schnell going to be the fighter to bring them back into the win column? And I think that Al-Selwady may be the fighter who brings them back into the win column against Leroy-Radzhabov, who you watched the best of Loic, and that was against Chris Wade in PFL. He went on to lose 2 consecutive bouts after defeating Chris Wade. And you've seen what Radzhabov brings to the table. He is a ball of muscle out there. Looks a little deflated on the scales yesterday. I was a little bit concerned. Al-Selwady also muscled up. In this bout, I see Radzhabov, his wrestling ability, the ability to contain, corral opponents, drain their energy against the cage, and try to maintain some semblance of top position here. But Selwady, when I watch him fight, very explosive fighter. We must mention also, this is a case inside of the Apex where we have Saif Saud screaming at his fighters. And I think that he's going to utilize the lateral movement and the explosiveness to cause Radzhabov fits. Look no further than the Hardwick fight on Contender Series, and you saw Selwady came in as a plus 300 underdog in that fight, and he was getting the better of Hardwick on the feet, and the lateral movement and the cardio actually was pretty impressive as well. So I don't trust Radzhabov's cardio, and I'll be picking Al-Selwady to win that fight. Next up, we have Ludovic Klein taking on Erceg-Cunningham. Now, this is a fight that has been put together on short notice, and I tweeted yesterday that I have some serious concerns if Erceg-Cunningham has to absorb a clean head kick delivered by Ludovic Klein. We saw what happened when Shane Young tried his best out there. It ended with the main event of the evening. I believe Israel Adesanya in his post-fight speech made a big stink about Ludovic Klein coming in overweight for that bout. Well, look at Ludovic Klein here and the lead up to this fight. He's muscle bound. He has put in a full camp. He seems to have added some new wrinkles to his game. I was heavy on Mason Jones against Ludovic Klein. That was a bet that I lost. And I learned that there were new wrinkles to Ludovic Klein's game. We saw against Nate Landwehr how down at 145 pounds, Ludovic Klein, his gas tank, his pace wasn't there. But Ludovic Klein's going to need some space to land these kill shots if he's going to land on Erceg-Cunningham. And if he doesn't, if he ends up emptying this clip on Cunningham, Cunningham is a bit of a standing duck or a sitting duck, so to speak. I think that Cunningham's going to be playing the role of punching bag, and it's either Ludovic Klein gasses himself out going for the kill here and Erceg-Cunningham comes on, or does Ludovic Klein end up taking Cunningham out of there? And I'm inclined to believe, no pun intended, that Ludovic Klein is going to get this done inside the distance. Now, does it happen under 1.5 rounds? I think that there's a possibility that that happens. I believe this line has now been juiced a little bit. I saw it was at minus 115, bet up to minus 140 or so. So if I'm looking around, scope out the under 2.5. In that case, I do not advocate for playing a minus 900 on Ludovic Klein under any circumstances. But the pick is going to be Ludovic Klein here. And AJ Cunningham, what does he bring to the table? Toughness, grit, a great backstory in the lead up to this. He was saved from a family who were abusing him, and it was pretty horrific to hear the details of what took place there. And it's a shame that now he gets put in a spot here where he's a sacrificial lamb, so to speak. But if he's able to survive and somehow make it to the third round, and Ludovic Klein has emptied his clip, that would be something. But give me Ludovic Klein in this matchup. Before we get to the next fight, let's just take a look at some of the comments here. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Good morning. I know it's bright and early. We just got kicked off at 8:30 this morning. Professor Chaos, great to see you. Like your avatar. I'm glad the coffee is flowing. And JP, great to have you in here. I feel like this is a great thing. I'll look forward to meeting up with everybody at the UFC Atlantic City card at the end of this month. It will be a great night of fights. Let's say, oh, look at this. We got Flea 299 is right around the corner. Thank you. Thank you. Let's see. We have to pick our spots here. It is Bellator-like. There are some very, very wide lines here. I totally agree with you. Evan, good morning. Hope you're getting that workout in this morning, pumping away. Let's see. Arkansas upset. I'm pulling for AJ Cunningham. I hope he shocks the world. I have no money on that fight. If I'm going to put money on it, though, it's going to be in an under situation. I see you mentioned that the young maestro's mentioning the over 1.5 as value. AJ's going to wrestle. I hope he does. He's going to have to try to drain Klein. All right, let's talk Christian Leroy-Duncan taking on Claudio Ribeiro. I was at Claudio Ribeiro's fight against Joseph Holmes, and there were some sketchy moments during that fight. Holmes, one of the unfortunately one of the worst fighters that the UFC has ever seen. And you look at opponents who faced Joseph Holmes and another fighter, Jamie Pickett. I believe that was Jamie Pickett's last win. Jamie Pickett's now on a 4-fight losing streak. So setup fight for Eric Anders there. But let's talk Christian Leroy-Duncan here, who the Armin Petrosian matchup is a situation where you have a young fighter who was undefeated and a fighter in Leroy-Duncan who's used to attempting strikes that are unorthodox. He uses spinning attacks. He uses his size, his reach, his explosiveness, and so does Claudio Ribeiro. I originally, when I was taping this fight, I'm like, wow, Claudio Ribeiro is massive for the weight class, and you watch the way these fighters face off. Christian Leroy-Duncan looks a full weight class larger than Claudio Ribeiro. So interesting how this is going to unfold. I got in on Leroy-Duncan when he was in the minus 220s. Now he's been bet out to minus 375. And this fight, there is volatility to it. I do see that. I see that Ribeiro, if he's going to win this fight, it's going to be on an explosive hook, an uppercut. He's going to go for the kill or be killed. And we've seen that many times before. Abdul Razak Al Hassan, etc. I think Leroy-Duncan, the much younger fighter, the much larger fighter, an explosive fighter who's now taken that first loss under his belt at a professional level, I think that he's going to come in and right the ship here. But like everybody says, or not everybody, I say it, but there are no certainties in this game. And Leroy-Duncan could potentially get caught, but I favor him significantly in this matchup. Now, Let's talk about another matchup here. Javid Basharat taking on Ayman Zahabi. Zahabi is a fighter who's sitting at plus 525, and Javid Basharat sitting at minus 750. Basharat likely wants to get that taste out of his mouth, that bitter taste out of his mouth from the groin strikes that he delivered to Victor Henry. We saw in Abu Dhabi what took place there. The fight got called off, and there was some banter between the two fighters. Josh Barnett was also lending his 2 cents in. These two fighters, when they stand next to each other, are almost mirror images of each other, similar frames, similar height, similar reach. Much younger fighter in Basharat, much more active fighter. And also, when you talk about defensive prowess and slick movement, Basharat has that all day over Zahabi. But Zahabi is a solid fighter himself when it comes to technical standpoint. Now, pace, pressure, volume, all on the side of Javid Basharat here. I also think the durability is in favor of Basharat. What's a concern, he hasn't really muscled up at all. Neither has his brother. At some point, I'd like to see the physique start to change a little bit, start to add a little bit more muscle for the Basharat brothers. I know that, this is the 135-pound weight class, but look at the level of competition. Look at others in the weight class as well. I think that I'm concerned about their strength and conditioning, and I wonder the cost-benefit analysis from that standpoint. But I got in on Javid Basharat multiple times in the minus 300s, and now he's been bet out to minus 750, even higher than that on multiple books. So in this spot, I do think Basharat rolls, but how does he get it done? That's the question. He could potentially drag this fight out to a decision. Zahabi is going to have to catch Basharat with something to win this fight. I don't see the volume I don't see him keeping up pace with Basharat. I think Zahabi is going to lose rounds decisively, and if he wants to win this fight, he's going to have to hurt Basharat. But Basharat, he's been hunting for a finish multiple times. It almost seems like he's playing with his food, hasn't been able to get it. I think that a finish could potentially be on the table here. I see a lot of folks playing the fight does go the distance, and you look at this fight goes to a decision at minus 200. Should be interesting, but I am on Basharat in the minus 300s. Now, this is one of the best fights on the card. I taped this fight and was impressed with both fighters here. Bernardo Sopaj taking on Vinicius Oliveira. Vinicius Oliveira reminds me of Cowboy Alex Oliveira, the way that he is very unorthodox in his approach, very lanky fighter. Both of these fighters, by the way, if you watch the weigh-ins and even after the weigh-ins, they were going at each other. There's a lot of bad blood here, but not necessarily bad blood. I think both of these fighters are just uber confident in their abilities. Fight doesn't go the distance, sitting at minus 250. You have Bernardo Sopaj, who reminds me a little bit of Prado, the way he's undersized. He is a bulldog out there and is going to move forward, dive into his strikes, and tough as nails. You look at the records of these fighters, 11-2 overall for Sopaj, and then 19-3 for Vinicius Oliveira. But a lot of the wins for Oliveira are questionable, in my opinion. Went back and watched it. The level of competition hasn't been up to snuff. That being said, Sopaj is coming in on relatively short notice. You do realize that it looks like he did have a fight booked coming up, but look in shape. Both of these fighters going at each other on the scales. Oliveira is going to be my pick. I think that you watch back his fight on Contender Series, and you also in the come-ups, you watch the explosiveness, and he ended up losing on the regional scene, was knocked out, but he was in that fight. And you look at the trajectory of the fighter he lost to, is now in the PFL, very dangerous fighter. I am going to be picking Vinicius Oliveira, but this is a fight that I think that the unders are potentially in play. I think that the bad blood is going to lend itself to violence inside the octagon, and I'm not sleeping on Sopaj. I watch not only the regional tape, but what he brings to the table in this matchup is part of Oliveira's kryptonite. And styles make fights. That's a key here. When you watch certain styles, the long, lanky frame versus an explosive fighter who loves counter shots, who will enter the pocket and throw heat, that is the danger zone. So that is a danger zone for Vinicius Oliveira, and we've seen that exploited before. Give me Oliveira, but dangerous fight. Let's see. We've got some more comments here. We've got, I'm in the small minority, but I think it could work out. Be a bad matchup for Basharat. Interesting. Real question. Does Basharat go for the submission finish? Interesting. And let's see. Thank you, Loner. I appreciate it. All right, let's continue the journey. We've got Eric Anders taking on Jamie Pickett. Now, why is Jamie Pickett still in the UFC? That is the question. Is it because he took on Bo Nickel? We see these fighters take these matchups where they're on the wrong side of a cupcake matchup. They get brutalized, and then they come back and the UFC tries to match them up in a somewhat competitive matchup, but this line's been blown out. I believe Anders was in the minus 300s or so, and now he's out to minus 535. Eric Anders, I was at his UFC debut on Long Island, and I believe it was Rafael Natal who he ended up flooring with a left straight punch. Now, Anders, he looked horrible on the scales. He looked bad. I got to be honest. But this is a fighter who's used to draining himself, and he's a professional. He's a fighter who is a meat and potatoes fighter, very rudimentary out there. We know the football background, and he's got a lot of grit. He could potentially land takedowns here against Pickett, use fight IQ to win this fight. Pickett's going to have to land something heavy, a wild head kick, or I don't see him causing Anders a lot of trouble here. Granted, this fight, it is at 185 pounds, and both of these fighters are getting up there in age. Eric Anders now 36 years old, plus you tag on all of that football experience. That's a lot of wear and tear on the body. Pickett, he's hugging Eric Anders at the weigh-ins. Man, I'm not touching Eric Anders as a big time favorite here, though I believe that he has the ability to roll. I think that there is a bit of a danger zone for Eric Anders if Jamie Pickett decides to throw, because that's one thing about Eric Anders. Doesn't move his head that well. He's getting outstruck often in fights. The volume isn't there. Go all the way back to the Lyoto Machida fight, and he was doing himself a disservice there. Could not close the distance. His footwork isn't great. He's a plodding fighter, but he does have many of the tools to win this fight. I gotta throw that out there, and he is a deserving favorite. So give me Eric Anders, but no way am I touching him at that money line or even close to it. Now, let's see. We've got Steve Erceg taking on Matt Schnell in a great flyweight matchup. Let's see. Guy Fieri's in the house here. What a matchup. The worst to ever do it. And Pickett against Anders, who shouldn't be minus 530 against a broomstick. You put it so eloquently there. Thank you, Guy Fieri. And I appreciate your diners, drive-ins, and dives show. Great show. Next time I'm out at one of your restaurants, I will stop by and say hello. So let's talk Steve Erceg taking on Matt Schnell. Steve Erceg was also in the minus 300s for quite some time, and now his line's been blown out. And Matt Schnell, who, I'll be honest, one of my favorite fighters, one of my favorite flyweight fighters. He comes from a solid camp with Team Fortis. He's someone who's going to fight hard for your money, granted, until his consciousness is taken from him. And he also has a good pace. He's very technical, but he's got some big red flags here. Does not take punches well. He will check out of a fight when there's major adversity if there's a choke that's applied on him. But I was at his Su-Mudaerji matchup, and a ref could have stopped in, I'm going to say 4 or 5 separate times to stop that fight. They let him continue. Mudaerji was fighting on a torn ACL, got taken down, and we've seen what Mudaerji's ground game is. It's non-existent, basically. Now, Schnell, we talked that side of the fight. Now let's talk Steve Erceg. I was a bit of a skeptic when Steve Erceg arrived onto this scene against Dvorak, and then the Alessandro Costa fight. Very, very impressed with what I've seen inside of the octagon. Not often do you see folks come over from the other side of the world and they have great grappling, and Erceg has excellent grappling. He's very long for the division, got a solid chin on him, and he's a dog. I mean, he's not an underdog here, but he's a dog who's going to come out and fight hard for your money. He's got solid cardio. And on the regional scene, we didn't see the solid cardio. I wasn't very impressed with the cardio. That was one of the things that was a cause for concern. But here, if he's able to land on Schnell, and what's interesting, it doesn't have to be a seminal blow. We've seen Schnell get cracked and wilted by very weak flyweights. And this is the lightest division in men's mixed martial arts. So I have a big problem with Schnell's durability. I have a problem with Schnell's layoff, and I have a problem with Schnell's age here in his mid-30s at flyweight. I think that Erceg is the rightful favorite. If Schnell survives into the later rounds, it could get very interesting. But I'm on Erceg here at a much better number than -455. And I think that he has the skills across the board to cause Schnell some problems after he lands a strike or two. And Schnell is going to be fighting for his life out there. Yes, could Schnell come out? And we saw against Tyson Nam, that was in 2021, where Matt Schnell came in and fought a phenomenal game plan in Abu Dhabi. That was in the larger octagon, though. And he doesn't have the footwork. Sorry, he has footwork, but he doesn't have the space to implement that type of game plan for 15 minutes. So give me Steve Erceg to win. Oh, wow. What fighters do you like to win by sub? I could see Erceg winning by sub here, even though Schnell has a solid ground game. I think that it could end up being a club and sub type of event here. And I'll share another fighter who could potentially win by sub. We'll talk the next fight here, where we have a Bellator-ish wide line. We've got Erceg-Almakhan taking on Umar Nurmagomedov. Umar Nurmagomedov coming in as the -1200 betting favorite. Now, how are you going to attack this line? We've seen previous UFC cards where there's an Asian fighter recently who came in as a close to this number favorite, and he was not getting the finish. So just because you have a -1000 or -1200 line does not mean that even though there's a huge discrepancy in skill set, that doesn't mean that a finish is going to take place. Now, Umar Nurmagomedov, does he have the skills to pay the bills? Yes. What impresses me about Nurmagomedov is his striking ability. It's funny how you hear the name Nurmagomedov and most people instantly think grappling, but the way this kid has thrown kicks, almost like he's throwing hands effortlessly, the way he's able to land, it's almost a point fighting style when he's at range, and he doesn't get clipped often, doesn't get hurt, fights safe, and that leads to career longevity. And that's something that Umar, I believe, is going to have here. He's only 28 years of age, and this is a bit of a risky fight to take on a what you'd consider a no-name fighter, Erceg-Almakhan, who, yes, has a 16-1 overall record, and perhaps that brings some confidence to the table. But we've seen against Nate Maness and others, if Umar wants to take the fight to the mat and just hold position on opponents and maintain top position, he could do that for the entirety of a round after a takedown. So I think you could be potentially playing with fire here if Almakhan has the submission defense. But I also think it's worth taking a look at the Umar Nurmagomedov submission line here. I think that is a path to victory here. Almakhan is going to have to come out and surprise Nurmagomedov. That's the way. That's one way big underdogs come through, is you catch your opponent off guard. You don't let them get settled and find the timing and find the range. You come out guns blazing. I was at one of the biggest upsets, I believe the biggest upset in MMA history, back at Pride 33, when one of the Nogueira brothers ended up getting knocked off. Now, so give me Umar Nurmagomedov via submission. Let's see. What's up, brother? Excited for this card, and I'm glad I hit my Torres sub last week, and it actually happened. Great number, and don't hold your breath too long. Look at that face. You all right, my brother? Umar, and over 9.5 at plus 100 is not a bad look. Okay. I could see, yes, he does play with his food, and you're right, he has the GSP style down, JP. And you talk about longevity, you talk about lasting in this game and not giving up too many of your brain cells, and that's something that Umar Nurmagomedov can do. Umar by decision, you like at plus 165. Fascinating. Top of the morning. Good to see you. Let's get back to breaking down these fights. Let's talk a fighter who I have had a 100% capping rate on, Alex-Perez, from a betting perspective. I've cashed on him basically every time he's come into the octagon, whether it be fading or backing. And he's taking on Muhammad Mokaev, who has been growing and developing in front of our eyes. Muhammad Mokaev has shown significant warts in his game. And when you're losing multiple rounds to Tim Elliott, when you're losing rounds to Malcolm Gordon, that is not good. That is horrific. That is dangerous. And I don't recommend folks laying a minus 300 or higher number on Muhammad Mokaev here against Alex-Perez, who did make weight, which kudos to you, Alex-Perez, for making weight. Proud of you, my brother. Alex-Perez is a fighter who I have loved his skill set. The wrestling, the submissions, the head and arm chokes that he's utilized. The striking against Shorty Torres was very, very impressive. Now, what is taken out of Alex-Perez here? How much did he drain himself to make weight? His physique does look much different than it did in previous matchups. I will say that. It seems like, he had to do that to make weight, right? He's huge for a bantamweight. I've seen Alex-Perez compete at 135 pounds, and he is one of the biggest bantamweights. And here he is cutting down to 125 pounds. And I'm going to be rooting for Alex-Perez in this matchup. I just can't bring myself to play him from a betting perspective. I think that Mokaev is going to utilize his chain wrestling here to compete and push Alex-Perez. That's what I see happening here. Now, could Mokaev come out and get taken down? Can he get held down? That is up for debate. I believe that he could, from a physicality standpoint. Yes, that could happen. But Mokaev's a fighter who doesn't give up on himself, and we've seen that time and time again. He was caught in some serious submission attempts against Elliott and Filio. So I'm going to be picking Mokaev here, but I think that Alex-Perez is extremely live in this fight. I just, man, I've been contemplating a play on Alex Perez. I just can't bring myself to do it. I'm going to see what you guys have to say in the comments section. This is Alex's fight to lose, as crazy as that sounds. I agree with you. I agree with you. Look at not only the skill set, the caliber of competition. Imagine how a fight would look if Davison Figueiredo in his prime was fighting Muhammad Mokaev. There have been others. Pantoja against Mokaev. That doesn't sound crazy at all. Okay. Perez plus 300. Yeah, it's getting there. It's getting there. I'm going to be rooting for Alex Perez. I can't deny the skill set that he has. He's a smart fighter, but he does lose via submission. That's his kryptonite. He struggled with submission defense. And Mokaev, I could see if Mokaev locks something up, I could see around 3 submission. I could see even around 2 submission Mokaev. So I am going to pick Mokaev to win this fight via submission, and I think he gets it done late. And maybe we're sprinkling Mokaev via submission, and the odds are looking pretty tempting. So take a look at that, and let's see how it plays out. Now, is this a Alex Perez retirement fight? Good question. Good question. Making weight is the green light on Perez. Yeah, we needed to see that. Now, this is a great fight right here, my brothers. Vitor Petrino taking on Tyson Pedro in a bout where you have the up-and-comer in Petrino, who is spry. He's 26 years of age. He's a fighter who is someone I refer to as tough. John Davidson would refer to him as tough. When you look back at, I grew up enjoying hockey and hockey fights, and I'm a child of the late 70s, early 80s. So John Davidson mentioned tough about fighters like Rudy Pocek, a young Ty Domi with the Rangers, Darren Langdon, Joey Koser, and that tough applies to Vitor Petrino here. He can take punishment. He's undefeated. He's a fighter who, yes, he's going to get cracked on the button. And yes, he's going to have sketchy moments. But does he come out the other side of the fight victorious? Most oftentimes, yes. And Tyson Pedro is a very dangerous opponent. Vitor Petrino does not move his head. Vitor Petrino is a plodding fighter who's a wrecking ball out there. I love what I've seen from Petrino. He's one of my favorite up-and-comers, as I previously mentioned. But this is an extremely dangerous fight for Petrino, especially early. The first round, Pedro has to empty his clip here. He has to empty his clip if he wants a chance. I don't see this fight going the distance. Petrino, look at the grapplers in his corner. Look at the proficiency of his ground game. I know the Turkali fight was a bad look, but he's figured it out now. He is a fighter who has continued to figure it out. And I think you look at John Jones, you look at other young fighters who there were holes in their games in the previous fights, and then they get shored up in the next fight. I think that's what we're going to see here. That being said, Petrino is susceptible to getting clipped. Watch back most of his fights. His head movement is not there, but he will land power punches, and this kid can crack. I have no idea how he makes the weight, to be honest. At 205 pounds, I thought he's much, much larger and thicker than Jailton Almeida. They fight out of the same camp. I have no idea how he makes 205 pounds. I could see Petrino at some point moving up to heavyweight. I like Petrino in this matchup. I don't like the number. I don't like minus 375 or even minus 275. I think this is the perfect live betting opportunity here. You're going to wait until Petrino gets out of the first round. It should be a solid, competitive minute or so, 2 minutes. It might even, you might wait until before the first round ends and Pedro has emptied his clip, and then you can hammer the Petrino side. I'm going to be picking Petrino to win. I think that he has the ability to win this fight by submission and by knockout. I'm leaning by KO, And Pedro, we've seen this is a guy who hasn't won a fight after the first round in his UFC career. So look at the numbers, look at the age, look at the resume. Give me Petrino inside the distance, and you're going to get a much better number than Petrino money line. Let's see. Now, we're going to talk main event of the evening, but before we do that, look at this. You got Vitor at -110 earlier in the week, inside the distance. Nice job by you. The pleasure man almost rode Petrino into the sunset. Well, that's a key. You bring up a good point, that these holes that were in a fighter's game earlier in their career, I know it was only a year or so ago, but that was a teachable moment, and that was a character building experience. Now, let's talk Shamil Gaziev taking on Jair Rozenstruik. We know exactly who Jair Rozenstruik is at this stage in his career. He's a kickboxer who's going to use his range management to cause you fits. And he's going to attempt to land one strike for every 4 or 5 strikes that you throw at him. And he's going to make that one strike count. He's got dangerous kicks, dangerous punches. He can survive, and the longer the fight goes, if you haven't beaten the hell out of him, he will still be there, like we saw against Alistair Overeem, ready to deliver a fight-ending blow. But can we trust him? Can we trust him at this number, at 35 years of age? That's a good question. And Shamil Gaziev is sitting at -185 at the betting window. How did he get here? That is the question. He beat Greg Velasco and Martin Buday, and he was an underdog against Martin Buday. And now he's the main event of the evening as a significant favorite against a battle-tested, main event-tested fighter in Jair Rozenstruik. Wins over JDS and others, but he is one-dimensional in Jair Rozenstruik. Shamil Gaziev has the wrestling. Does he have the durability early? Possibly. At what point does Gaziev look like he's completely exhausted in this matchup? It has yet to be determined. I am inclined to believe that Gaziev could potentially run out of gas the longer this fight goes, but I also see the wear and tear and the damage that he could implement and impose when he's imposing his will on Rozenstruik. If Rozenstruik is under him, that may be a real threat also. So I'm leaning towards the Shamil Gaziev side. This isn't a fight I've touched from a betting perspective. You see fight doesn't go the distance is at -2,000 for fight doesn't go the distance. Really fascinating. Now, ET says Gaziev's going to walk Jair down all fight and break him. Okay, well, if he walks him down, he's gonna set Jair up for Jair landing his strikes as Gaziev's closing the distance. That's one concern of mine. If Jair sits down on his punches, and we've seen what happens when Jair sits down on his punches. Ngannou, that exchange that ended Jair's night and sent him into the shadow realm against Francis Ngannou. Watch back that fight. Millimeters separated Jair Rozenstruik landing and Francis Ngannou landing. And who found the target first? Francis Ngannou did. And that fight was over and out. Now, does Gaziev have that same type of power? No, but the well-roundedness of Gaziev is something that I rate very highly. I think that he's a technical, the acumen and the ability is much higher from a well-roundedness point of view. If you include the Overeem fight as a loss for Jair, which you do, he's 6-6 in the UFC. Go look at Petrino's physique during the Pleasure Man's fight compared to last fight. Yeah, there is a big difference. By the way, I see you over there. Predator, one of the best films of all time. Get to the chopper. Love that movie. Gaziev looks bigger than Rozenstruik. Yes, massive. That is true. Battle of the Chin Beards. That is what we are about to see. I see a lot of fights ending inside the distance. I do. Best of luck, everyone. Evan, Thank you. Remember to like and subscribe. I appreciate everybody. So the pick's going to be Shamil Gaziev, but I believe that this is a dangerous fight for him. This is a show me spot. I think that there are other avenues to pursue from a betting perspective on this card. I think that the Petrino inside the distance is a spot, and there are others. Also, if you got in early before these numbers completely were blown out of the water, that's another that was another path to cashing on this card. But we'll see how it plays out. There are no certainties in this game. Thanks everybody for tuning in. I appreciate all the comments throughout. And remember, 1:30 p.m. start time today. Have a great evening and great day, and go out there, get what's yours. Let's do it. One fight at a time. That's the key here. Let's go, my brothers. Let's go. Take care.